How do former West Virginia Mountaineer football players feel about the return of Rich Rodriguez to coach the Mountaineers? Well, we're going to talk to one of those former Mountaineer players in this episode of Couz's Corner. So stick around and we'll have that conversation right about now. What is up? Welcome into this episode of Couz's Corner. Thanks for tuning in. We are here to serve up top shelf content around the West Virginia Mountaineers and the Big 12. Today we have a very special guest, former West Virginia Mountaineer quarterback, now Dr. Chad Johnston. Chad, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
Thanks for coming back. The first time I see wasn't so bad, so you decided to join me again.
That's right. I'm a slow learner.
That's yeah, that's right. You are, aren't you?
Yeah, right. I've been hitting the head too many times.
There you go. There you go. Hey, just let everybody know, man. A lot of Mountaineer fans watch my show. Let everybody know what's been going on in the life of Chad Johnston lately, man. Anything exciting?
I just recently bought a house. I live in Pearisburg, Virginia, believe it or not, but it's a little bit closer to home for me. I work in Blacksburg mainly, so it's sort of in between my hometown of Peterstown and Blacksburg. So just stay pretty busy. We were talking off camera there. I said I work, I mow, I golf, and I mow now.
There you go. Do you when do you go do golf? Where do you golf at mostly?
I'm a member. There's a little country club here in Giles County. I'm still a member in Blacksburg, and then I play at my buddy Newberry's place over at Fountain Springs as often as I can.
Cool. Yeah, good deal.
I'll be heading over there on July the 4th, early in the morning to play.
Another fellow Mountaineer.
Yes.
Steve Newberry. I think he still holds an interception record, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing that all these years, and especially how the game's changed over the last 25, 30 years, that there hasn't been a closer challenge. And my classmate, Aaron Beasley, came the closest. I think he was one short. So
yep, that's the career record, right?
Yes.
Career interception record at West Virginia. I think he has 22.
Yeah, somewhere around there, 20, 22, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Steve's definitely a Mountaineer legend for sure in his own right.
Absolutely. We talk all the time. He's like my big brother. So, his first year of coaching high school ball at Peterstown was my senior year. So, I've been hanging out with him. And then he coached with my stepdad for probably 25 years or more. So,
gotcha.
At James Monroe High School. So,
I didn't realize he was a coach.
Yes, he started coaching my senior year, and we won the state championship that year. I told him it was all downhill from there from year one.
That's true. Hey, man. So, I actually saw a picture not long ago. Speaking of Steve, I actually saw a picture floating around online of him and Coach Rod. I guess he drove up to Morgantown to make the visit. I know several players have made that visit. Have you been able to make the trip yet?
I have not. Well, I made it up for the spring game. I was up there. My two boys went to school up there, and my older son lives in Christiansburg and works in Roanoke, so he's my travel partner.
Gotcha.
Received tickets to Morgantown. My younger son he's graduated, but he still lives in Morgantown. So we went up there and crashed with him and hung out and went to the spring game. So I didn't really get a chance to hang out there. I was hanging out with those two guys most of the time. But
right.
Kevin Johnston, who's head of the varsity club, ran into him at Kegler's, and I know they're trying to get a lot of the older guys back to come back and support it. And Steve and Rich were teammates. I think Rich was a year behind Steve, if I'm not mistaken. And Rich recruited me actually when he was at Glenville, and I used to talk to Rich in the facilities building. He'd come up trying to recruit players. He'd say, "Hey, who's going to make it? Or what do you think of this guy here? He might transfer or something like that."
Oh yeah.
So he and I would talk players, and
that's awesome. So you do have a relationship with him then. That's cool.
Yes. So, and then I lived there. I did my residency in Morgantown. I did a second tour of duty in Morgantown from 2005, 2009. So I was there the last few years, the Pat White years, and
okay.
And then at the end of Rich's time there and the beginning of Coach Stewart's. So I lived up there, and several of the coaches had kids. I lived in the Cheat Lake area. Several of the coaches had kids that were my kids' age or played in the rec department. So, I know Jeff Castile. I knew Butch Jones. Herb Hand had kids out there. Coach Stewart, I knew him and his son Blaine. It was a pretty with that and what was going on with basketball at that time, it was a pretty awesome time to be in Morgantown.
It was, man, wasn't it? It was an awesome time to be a fan at that point in time too. I'll never forget those days, man. I would imagine, because I know Coach Rod's been doing a lot about, or a lot as far as trying to embrace the old players, make them feel welcome. In talking with some of your former teammates and former Mountaineers, are you getting a sense that that's the case, that they are welcoming back a lot of these former players and making them feel at home?
Yeah, one of my, I have a group of guys that we talk every day by text. Anyway, there's 6 of us, and we talk. We take a little trip every August to the Jersey Shore together. And one of those guys is John Conte, who was a Morgantown High grad, and then played there, came in under Coach Nealon and finished up there at the end of Nealon's tenure. And he was just recently up there, and he sent us all pictures, and it was amazing. We kind of rolled out the red carpet for him, and he had pictures and his name all over the facilities building and up on the board, and so it was pretty cool. It was a good thing that they're doing. Welcoming back all the guys, and of course, Rich has one himself, and then obviously you have 2 or 3 staff that played there. So I think that's very important nowadays to have someone that has some connection, because guys, really guys leave so much now. If you can have some players that have been there and have that stuck around during previous seasons and careers, that they can kind of identify with them, so maybe they're not so anxious to leave. They see what the university has to offer, even after.
Absolutely. I think it's huge in instilling the culture that you want to instill, because those guys, I don't know, as a player, you probably, or as a coach rather, it's good to have those other former players sort of speaking your language. You know what I'm saying? To those younger guys, maybe they can relate to him a little more.
Yeah.
Even though he's played there, they don't look at him as a player. They look at him as Coach Rodriguez, right? They can talk to somebody else who has experienced it.
Yes, and sometimes the message
it's probably just a little different.
Yeah, and Coach Rich, he coaches pretty hard, and sometimes the message, depending on the kid, the message gets lost in translation, and it's where a guy like Pat White can come over and say, "Hey, I know this, but this is what he wants from you. This is what he means." And sometimes the reason he's on your ass is because he loves you, and he sees what you can be. And this, my parents were all coaches, step parents included, and they would tell you, when the coach quits yelling at you, that's when you need to worry more so than when they are yelling at you.
Absolutely, yes, they're yelling at you because they care. They know you've got it in you. They're trying to bring it out of you most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what were your initial thoughts when you heard that Coach Rod was going to be the guy?
It was funny that going into it, I wasn't sure about Rich coming back, but as time went on and the search went on, it became clear that he was the guy for the job. And this is the one thing about Rich. He's been there. There's no question Rich can coach, and he can put together a staff that can coach, and that's what you want. And I don't know. I feel like in today's environment, he will thrive, because I think he'll let you know where you stand. And I mean, look, he took Jacksonville State from a lower level program, and they were in their second year in D1, and they win the conference championship. So there's no question. And if they'd left him alone at Michigan, he would continue to win there.
I think so too.
I truly think that was more about their fit of what they, Michigan thinks pretty highly of themselves, and they wanted a Michigan man. You hear him say that all the time, and I think if they'd left him alone another year or so, he would have had them among the elites. So, as far as that goes with Rich, I don't fault him for taking that job. I mean, that's one of the premier jobs in the country, and if you're a coach, that's especially a young coach, that's what you're striving to do. Could the situation have been handled better? Probably so by both sides. But I don't fault him for taking that job. And I don't even think he needs to really apologize and say that he should have never left. I just think he just needs to, this is his home. This is where he's from and where he played and where he's had his most success. I just, all of us just want to win. That's one thing we have in common.
Winning cures it all, man.
Winning takes care of everything. So, and there's, like I said, there's no doubt the man can coach, and he put together staff that knows how to win. So it's just about getting players now.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like you. I was never a huge fan of the returning coach thing because in the past, if you look through history, it typically hasn't worked,
Right.
or at least they haven't. And even the ones that have had success didn't have the same level of success the second time around, with like one or two exceptions through history. But like you, when you looked at the other candidates for the job, you looked at the qualifications. It was clear to me that he was the best guy. And then when you add into that the backing he was going to get from some of the, or at least rumored backing he was going to get from some of the donors, uh, it's pretty public knowledge that he's close friends with a lot of those donors
Yeah.
up there. And you know, having Pat McAfee on national television backing you is not a not a bad thing either. So I think when you add all that together, I thought it was the right hire, and I think you're seeing a reinvigorated fan base. Season ticket sales are through the roof right now, the best they've been. I heard Ren say the other day the best they've been since 2013. So fans are excited again. They're bringing back the old helmets, which, by the way, what do you think about the glossy helmet, man?
I saw those. I had dinner with my oldest son last night. We were looking at them on
Mm-hmm.
Twitter at the dinner table. So we're excited about it. And my boys, we have a little chat group that we talk about
Yeah.
it. And so we're all very excited about it. And um, I just think, like you said, I think it was the right hire. Uh, with Rich at the helm, I think our three most important people outside of Rich are probably Pat McAfee, King Kendrick, and Pac-Man Jones. I mean, he has a huge following
Yep.
on for his podcast. So, those guys are talking about their glory days, and they're people, they're players that even today's players, they know who they are just by not only from their playing days, but from their off the field personalities.
Yep. Um, I mentioned the helmets earlier. Does that how much does that really matter to players? Do you think the uniforms and the helmets and those kinds of things? Do you think the players really care about that stuff?
Oh
Or
yeah, definitely. They're always talking about gear. What kind of gear can you get? Even when I was when in my playing days, we're talking about. Well, I went on this trip, and players, this school had this kind of gear. This school had this kind of gear. Now, what I think you'll see is over time with NIL and those sort of things, your gear may go down. Or may not be as important, or the accommodations because they're going to spend the money on the players. I don't think. I think probably less on facilities and staff and more on giving it to the players.
right? Yeah, I think so too. Everything's shifting that direction, and to be honest, it should have. I mean, the NCAA is way behind the eight ball on that. They should have been paying players, in my opinion, years ago, and it would have gotten to this chaotic mess that we're in now
Yeah.
in college sports. Man, it's an absolute mess.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people were kind of surprised when they talked to me about it because just because I was an old school player. I mean, I think the coaches in the universities have gotten rich off the backs of these players, and some of them putting their lives at risk, or even their, just long term health as far as how they get around and move around and things that they can do. And people talk about you get an education. That's true. You do get that, but you give up a lot of other stuff too, and so. I think they need to be sharing in that. But I do think, and I think the kids need to have some freedom to move around a little bit. I don't necessarily like how often and how much they can transfer.
Right.
Uh, I think if you're going to take money from an institution, there ought to be some sort of commitment to be there for a certain amount of time
Mm.
and make performance based pay. So I think there's some tweaking that's going to happen with this along the way, and but I'm glad the players are getting a share of the revenue, and I'm glad they do have some freedom to move around. But I don't necessarily feel sorry for those coaches who have said, "Oh, these players don't commit. Like, how am I supposed to get a team?" And then you have the situation like we had with our basketball team in the off season, which happens. You know, he's not the first coach to do it, and certainly not the last. But it happens all the time. You recruit a kid for a year, 6 months, get him to commit, and then you never coach him because you change jobs, and that's
Mhm.
that's the nature of the beast. But I think the players ought to have that freedom too.
Yeah. Yep. Well said. Again, a reminder: we're talking with Dr. Chad Johnston, former West Virginia Mountaineer quarterback. Started at West Virginia from '94 to '96. Is that right, Chad?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Hey, do me a favor. Go check out my good friends over at Appalachia Digital. If you need a brand new website for your small business, or if you're just looking to get found easier on Google, go check out appalachiadigital.com/Couz. These are the fine folks who designed my brand new website over at wvsportschat.com. They did a fantastic job. I love their work. I think you will too. So go check them out. appalachiadigital.com/Couz. Let them know Couz sent you. Now let's get back to the show.
So one of the most memorable moments in Mountaineer history probably was his touchdown pass to Zach Abraham to win the backyard brawl game. In 1996?
94. That was my first.
94. Okay.
And I'd really kind of taken the job back over the previous week down here at Virginia Tech on a Thursday night. And
That's right.
And we played Pitt up there, and you know back then bowl games were difficult to get to, and you had to win that game. Looking at the rest of our schedule,
Yeah.
We won out, except for our only loss was Miami at the end of the year. And of course, Miami was in the national championship game later in the year. So we put together a pretty good run there at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, that was. I still remember. I was just a teenager, but I remember watching that play on my I was actually at my buddy's house, watching it on his television. I'll never forget it, man. It was pretty cool, pretty magical, and of course, we all. You don't see a lot of Southern West Virginia boys playing at that level of college football, right? So we were all pulling for you, and it was pretty cool.
That's kind of, when you look at that score, I think it was like 47-41 or 46-41, something like that. I mean, that's a pretty common score nowadays, but back then, you didn't score that many points in it.
Right. Yeah, that was rare then.
Yeah.
You guys threw the ball around a lot, though. When you were quarterback, y'all threw the ball around quite a bit, didn't you?
We threw it around a lot my first couple of years. My last year, we were pretty young on offense. It was me and just a couple other guys, seniors, and we had that really stout defense in '96. A lot of NFL guys on that defense, and a lot of seniors on the defense. And first play of the season, we hand off to Amos Zaraway for a touchdown. So sort of, we had that great rushing attack and great running back, and we had that great defense. We didn't throw it quite as much that year, but my first couple of years, we aired it out quite a bit.
Yeah. Oh man, it's hard to. I tell you what, I bet it was pretty cool to play with somebody with Amos Zaraway's talent and ability.
Oh yeah, I mean the thing was the year before Jimmy Gary and Robert Walker got hurt, and we played another freshman named Curtis Keaton who played a little bit that year. He transferred to JMU and he played with the Saints for a little while. Everyone sort of thought Amos might be the guy, but they didn't want to burn his year, so they kept his redshirt year. Back then, it's not the same rules now. If you played one down, you lost your year. Right. So, that running back class was loaded. There was another kid named Alvin Swoop that played a little bit, who ended up leaving WVU, but he was equally as talented as Amos and the Keaton kid. And I say kid, he's a man now, but at the time, they were freshmen. I was a senior. Those guys, they were that group of running backs were very, very good.
Yeah. Yeah, West Virginia's had a lot of great running backs come through there over the years, man.
Yeah, and it's funny, and this will be my time to tout him. Every time I go back for something, I saw him at the spring game. I saw Adrian Morrell. A lot of people don't talk about Adrian, but Adrian, in my mind, and this is not a knock against anybody else, he's the best running back to play at WVU, arguably ever. If you remember, let me think, it was my true freshman year in '92. We came back to beat Maryland. Adrian. I think he had a great he had moves, he had speed, he could run over you, he had a devastating stiff arm. He stiff armed a guy right in the ground against Maryland for a touchdown. And then later in the game, because I think we scored like 21 or 28 points in the fourth quarter to win, something crazy like that. Studstill brought us back. You could line him up in the slot. He lined up in the slot and ran a quarter out and caught the game-winning touchdown pass. And so Adrian Morrell, I think a lot of people overlook him. They talk about the guys that played after him. For my money, he's the best running back to ever play at West Virginia.
Well, and he spent several years in the league, if I'm not.
Yeah, he did.
maybe.
He rushed. I think he rushed for over 1,000 yards for the Jets a couple different times.
Yeah,
And you know, that's no easy. That was especially back then. That was a huge feat to do that. But
absolutely it was. Yeah,
I think he ended up having some knee problems throughout time. But he's such a nice guy, and I tell him every time I see him. So I'm sure he enjoys every time I come up to talk to him. That tell him I tell him every time, you're the best running back to ever play here.
yeah. He's definitely one of the ones that never gets enough love. I mean, you hear about Steve Slayton, and you hear about Amos's name gets brought up. You hear about Avon Coburn, and look, all those guys are awesome.
Yes.
But Adrian's name you're right. It doesn't get mentioned a whole lot. And
No.
I think a lot of it's recency bias, probably.
Yeah. Yes. I think so too. And you know, you get these kind of more wide open offenses. Those guys got to play in a little bit too. You know, all the numbers are so much different. You know, all the rules and the way the game's played now is just different, and so everything's more wide open. You know, back then it was a tight end, two wide outs, a fullback, a running back, and you know you were in the I formation all the time, and so he was unbelievable. I mean, I just saw him do incredible things on the practice field.
Yeah.
His stiff arm, he did that against Maryland, but he also did against Boston College. Just put a guy's face in the dirt and ran for a long touchdown. So it's unbelievably talented.
Yeah. Do you think Rich Rod? You were talking about Rich Rod, how he likes to coach hard earlier. Do you think one of the knocks against that style of coaching in today's landscape is, there's this kind of perception that today's generation is softer, and to be honest, I kind of understand that, right? I got kids myself. I know why people say that, but I don't think you can say that about every kid. Number one, and two. But my question is, do you think his style of coaching can still work today?
I think so. I think you got to find, just like everything else, you got to find the right kid. You got to find
Yeah.
the right for your style. You got to find the right kid that can run what you want him to, but also can handle your way of coaching. And I think he's very upfront with that. And if anybody's been to one of his practices, they're going to know what they're getting into. I mean, and I think that's his way of doing things. I could handle that. You know, Coach Nealon did not coach that way, but I played for coaches along the way. That didn't bother me. I mean, I wouldn't, I didn't talk back, but it was just sort of one of those things. It would just put a look on my face like, okay, I'll show you now. And some kids can handle it, some kids can't.
Right.
I will say this: I did take my boys when I first started as a resident in Morgantown. I took my boys to practice, and they were probably 8 and 5. We lasted about 10 minutes, and I said, "Yeah, I better get them out of here."
Yeah.
But you can't argue, the success that he's had everywhere he's gone. And that's why I think also having, Pat White, Noel Devine, those guys there to say, hey, look, you got to understand the message that's behind that, because and that's things that we see. And it used to concern me. Like when I saw that practice, it concerned me. But then when you see Pat McAfee or Pac-Man Jones talk about his the way he was with them off the field, so there's that other side that you don't get to see behind closed doors, where he's putting their arm around them and tells them, and because you can't be successful just being a hard ass all the time. You just can't. There's got to be the other side, and I think it's just his competitiveness. I want a coach that wants to compete and wants to win. I mean, that's the nature of our state. That's all we want. We want to compete and we want to win. And so I think that he'll be very successful. It's just about the good thing with the transfer portal now is maybe we don't have to wait 4 years. It might be 4 games. It might be a little bit longer. We don't know.
Yeah, I agree, and I like the fact that he is who he is. He doesn't try to hide who he is. He doesn't try to sugarcoat it. I've heard the West Virginia media guys talk about it, and I think they even put a video out he was running a camp for high school recruits and high school players, and he told them from the very beginning, "I'm going to coach you hard. We want players who are willing to be coached, and if you're not that type of player, we don't want you here at West Virginia. You're not a fit here." And he told them straight up front. And the guys who watched the camp said that he was in there and he did exactly what he said he was going to do. He was yelling at kids. He was coaching kids. He would stop them right in the middle of a drill and tell them what they were doing wrong. He was very hands-on. I mean, And not all coaches are like that. A lot of coaches are treat you differently. And I'm not saying there's not a reason for that, right? They don't want to scare you off, right?
Right.
They treat a kid differently when they're recruiting them than they
Correct.
do when you get them on campus. I
Right.
don't think he does that. He's going to this is who I am. This is what you're going to get when you get here. And I personally think that's refreshing, because when you commit there, you know what you're going to get, and you don't. There's not going to be that shock. There might be a little bit of wow factor when you have to do it every single day, but it's not going to be as big of a wow factor to me as it would be, if you didn't see it at all before you got there.
Yeah. And I think, we talk about the hard edge and that sort of
Mhm.
thing. If you can survive all that in the off season conditioning and do all those things and handle that sort of, then the game becomes easy, and all the other distractions that go with it, um, are much easier to handle. And also, I think too, with social media the way it is now and access, he has that hard side, but I'm sure our media staff and all his people are also, they're doing a very good job showing the other side of him as well. And I think
They
that's
are. They
yeah.
are. The helmet reveal video, the video they did with him and his two little dogs.
Yes, yes. So,
So, I mean, a lot of fans looked at that and went, "Oh my gosh, there's nothing hard edge about that." But like you said, you need to see that other side of Rich. Well, here's what changed my opinion of him is, because I was as mad as every fan when he left, right?
mhm.
But I had a chance to see his interviews that he did afterwards and explain his side of the story.
Yeah.
Once I heard his side of the story, I kind of opened my mind up. I was like, maybe maybe he wasn't the only one at fault in this situation. You know what I mean? There were
Right.
other people involved that might have had some blame, right? In
Yeah.
how and why he left. So it really changed and of course time heals wounds, right? It's been 17, 18 years, I guess, at this point since all that happened. And I mean, my gosh, he's 60, 61 years old now. I mean, it's time to move on. It's time to win, right? That's all. It's all, like we said earlier, that cures everything. But I think hearing his side of the story to me is what really changed my opinion on the whole thing. Did you ever hear that side of
Oh
the
yeah,
story?
yes, I've heard his side of the story and the things, and it's funny is like the things he wanted are things that we ended up doing. So, in some ways he was sort of ahead of the curve, and not only with his offense and with the spread and all
Yeah.
those things. He saw what was coming down the road as far as what kids needed to make us and to be competitive and get the kind of players we needed to be successful. And but I but I'm excited to see, just like everyone else, it's sort of an unknown, and I'm very excited to see what's going to happen whenever we tee it up. So I'm very excited about it. And like I said before, the number one thing is, more than anything, the man can coach, and so can his coaching staff. So those are the big things.
Yeah. Again, we're talking with Dr. Chad Johnston, former West Virginia Mountaineer quarterback, now a doctor at River Ridge Dermatology in southwestern Virginia. He's in Narrows, Blacksburg, and where's the other location?
Roanoke.
Roanoke. So
Yeah.
if you're in that area or travel to that area and you need a dermatologist, look up River Ridge Dermatology. I'm sure they'd be glad to take care of you over there. A lot of good folks, a very large team of doctors over there that can take good, and PAs and nurses as well. Um, you talked about his offensive style, and I want to ask you about it because you've done some coaching too, haven't you?
Yes. Yes.
And you're former college quarterback. Can you explain the difference in what Rich Rod? Rich Rod runs the zone read spread. Neil did a version of the spread too, but it was more from the air raid style. Can you explain the difference in them from a guy who's played offense before at that level?
Yeah. I mean, as especially when you have a guy like Pat White, it was mostly the quarterback keeping. He was reading backside keeping. If you look and see, they added some bubble screens and that sort of thing into the offense as Pat and then started progressing as a player. They added some of that stuff, so you saw some of that. But as the rules have changed, now I think if a lineman's engaged, he can be like over 5 yards downfield, and you can throw the ball down the field over there. That's why you see such, the run keys for DBs are very difficult because what do they do if they see a lineman engaged 5 yards down the field? They still can't come up and fill
Mhm.
run running lanes. They still have to stay in passing lanes. So it's that's the big difference. It's just the read of it used to be quarterback keep, and now it's become really three different things. A lot of times you'll have, even when I was coaching, we even did it at the high school level. We would have the run, we would have a bubble screen, a downfield throw, and even the quarterback keep. And you just kind of read grass. It wasn't, used to be you would read one guy and you could keep it and run, but now it's become a just read the field type of thing and read the map. And so I'm sure as it's progressed on, Rich does all those things. I know that he does.
Yeah.
I've watched State on the late night games or the Tuesday game or whenever he played during the week. So he progressed on as the game progressed and the rules changed. So early on, all that was to keep with the quarterback, and now it's such that it's running and throwing on the backside away the run on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah, he's. I mean, I saw one article that, recently. They called him the godfather of the zone read offense. Basically,
yes, and so
pretty impressive.
now you just don't have those downhill linemen running anymore. That's because Pat White pulls it and goes down. And next thing you know, he's 20 yards downfield going 1-on-1 with the safety.
Right.
But as offenses progress, defenses do too. May take them a little while. We don't have Pat White back there. I know that.
Correct.
I've watched those guys, and they're all good players. It's just, there's only one Pat White, and arguably, in my mind, you have Pat White and Major Harris, those two greatest Mountaineers ever, and you can argue back and forth which one's 1A and 1B, but they're both there. But as the game has progressed now, you've had the downfield throw. They don't even have to be behind the line of scrimmage. You can be downfield, even with linemen engaged downfield. So that's the big difference now.
Got it. Thank you for explaining that. Not to bring up the past too much, but man, if Garrett Greene was 1 year younger, could you imagine him in Rich Rod's offense?
Yeah, I know. And, I went to all the games this year. I thought, Garrett, one of the biggest problems I think we had last year in watching is we didn't have a receiver that could go get it. We didn't have anyone to take the top off of defense. And it's funny, I talked to my kids before the Penn State game, and I said, if I'm playing WVU right now after the way Garrett Greene ended the season, I'm going to load the box. I'm going to put one high or zero coverage, and I'm going to dare those guys to beat me deep, and I'm not going to allow Garrett Greene to run. I'm going to fill every run lane that there is because that's the easiest thing to do. And then your best receiver becomes a big, tall tight end who can't really run away from people. He's a matchup problem. Yeah. But I think when we lost all those outside guys and didn't have someone to take the top off the defense, because Garrett could throw it. I mean, even for a little guy, he could turn it loose and throw it down the field. They ran that route where the deep guy either runs a corner, he runs a post or a corner, and then the crosser comes and with no one being able to take the top off the defense, we kept throwing that tight end where they even started dropping and got picked a few times because we couldn't throw it downfield. And I think that's where a lot of times when you watch a game, a lot of people think, well, the quarterback's not any good this year. There's a lot of factors that go in to why an offense works or doesn't work. And our lack of speed at the wide receiver position was, I thought, a big problem for us last year because teams just loaded up the box and they beat up our tight end, and our quarterback had nowhere to go. He didn't have anywhere to throw it, and they had all the running lanes with. So I'm anxious to see. Hopefully, we can. You got to have every part to be really successful as an offense.
Absolutely. All 11 pieces have to work simultaneously. They have, I don't know if you saw this on social media the other day. They posted their 40, Jaheim White posted a thing with all their 40 times on it. I'm not sure if he was supposed to do that or not, but he did. Jaheim White at this point can probably do just about whatever he wants. But anyway, that dude's been in for a heck of a year.
And he looks like a man now.
Oh, man. But they've got 3 receivers now that are running a sub 4 540 on that roster.
But that's good. You got to have somebody, and you got to have some, and Nico, he can make those throws down the field.
Last year they might have had one, and that was a local kid that didn't get to play. So,
yes.
So, the one that I know of, there might have been some others that I'm not aware of, but I'm pretty sure he was it.
Yeah.